you're simply going to take the ordered pair, you're going to plug it in for x and y, and you're going to figure out, does it work or not? Does that equation, or does that point satisfy that equation? If it does, you say yes. If it doesn't, you say no. Number 2 is distance. Formula's on the board. 3 is midpoint. Formula's on the board. On number 4, we talked a little bit about mappings when we do something like this. And I think probably the easiest way to kind of approach this one is -3, -14 is a point. -3 goes to -14. -8 goes to 4. -8 also goes to -7. And really right there I can stop, right? Because -8 repeats and my x value cannot repeat. So this is not a function. You could also write out -13, -7. If all of your x values are different, it would be a function. 5 just has the ordered pairs listed out, so you're just looking at the x values. 6 is just simply a domain and range question. They don't have to list out the numbers in order, and they don't do that here. So it's just making sure everything's included in your domain and range. On questions like this, you got several graphing questions. I don't really like the instructions. I can't really change the instructions on the program that I use to make the tests. And so like the instructions, like the overall, like the short answer instructions are kind of random. But all I'm going to look for here is your graph. So you don't really have to put anything on the blank. There is no solving or anything. But on a graph, things that I would look for would be making sure it goes through the correct points. So I would look to make sure it's hitting some of the right points. So giving me a couple of ordered pairs, that would maybe be on that line, or whatever kind of graph we have, if it's a parabola or whatever it might be. And you can do that any way you want to. If you wanted to use your calculator, that's okay, but you're going to have to solve it for y to do that. And then you could look at your table and you can get some points off your table, and you could use your calculator for that. If you want to do the cover-up method and get your x and y intercepts, that would be okay too. Number 8, remember that 2 is your x value. It's saying, let's evaluate this function at 2, what y value corresponds to 2. So if 2 is my x value, what is my y value? Okay, and you got to figure out what that y value is going to be. You're just looking at the graph. There's no equation to plug in there. On number 10, really anytime that we do domain and range, I won't put these instructions on here every time, but I probably want you to get in the habit of doing it in interval notation. You'll see some later on here in the review that do domain and range, and you have multiple choice. You got to decide which one matches up. So just getting in the habit of knowing how to write interval notation is a big deal. As I look at number 10, what value of x can we not have? Okay, we can't have 0 where? On the bottom, okay? And so then we can't have 3. So some people would simply say x cannot be 3, and that's a true statement, okay? And that would be one way I could identify the domain. But kind of what I want you to get in the habit of doing is writing it in interval notation. And so we're saying all real numbers are applicable here except for 3. So we're going to go all the way up to 3. We're going to go all the way after 3, but we're not including 3. And remember that parentheses means not including. Brackets means we would include it. We'll look at another example here later on. Okay, 11 kind of goes back to yesterday. Are they parallel? Are they perpendicular? Or are they neither? We got to find the slopes of those two equations and determine what kind of graphs they are. 12 goes to the horizontal vertical stuff that we've talked about. Remember, vertical lines are straight up and down. They cross the x-axis. Horizontal lines are this. They cross the y-axis. Kind of remember the equations that correspond with those. 13 and 14 we're going to put it into slope-intercept form. So we have to know the slope, we got to know the y-intercept. So those would be kind of short answer questions. These would kind of be like what we talked about yesterday, give you different scenarios, 2 points, a slope and a point, different information. You got to put that information into an equation. And we want to finish out in slope-intercept form. 15, if you look at all 4 choices, once again, we're putting it in slope-intercept form. I got to find M. I got to find B. B should be pretty easy. Where does it cross the y-axis? And then we got to find our slope. The easiest way to find slope here is just to do rise over run. So we're going to go from point to point, make sure it's a point that goes through a coordinate exactly. We're going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over 1. So 5 over 1 is really just 5. So my slope would be 5. Okay. So like I said, a lot of questions on this quiz. Our quizzes aren't typically going to be 28 or whatever questions. We had 29 questions. A lot of these don't take a ton of time. Okay, and so that's why it's probably a few more questions what we typically have. 16, writing an equation or a function to represent the situation. So this is kind of a story problem where they give me a scenario. And you might have seen this one like in a science class before. So this is a formula you might be familiar with anyway. We're converting it from Celsius to Fahrenheit. And I wouldn't write X and Y here. I know a lot of equations we use X and Y, but I wouldn't use X and Y in this case. We're trying to convert this formula to Fahrenheit from Celsius. And so we're going to multiply the Celsius temperature by 1.8. So I'm going to say 1.8 times C, and then add 32 to the result. So that's my equation, okay? But the question's not asking what the equation is. The question is asking for us to take 21, plug it in for the Celsius temperature, and find out what F is. Okay, so that's why I think using F and C would be a better equation instead of X and Y. On 17, they're asking for the slope and y-intercept. So if we can solve that equation for y, it would be in slope-intercept form. We should know what the slope and the y-intercept is. The y-intercept, they're writing it as an ordered pair. Ordered pair of 0 something is my y-intercept. Okay, question like 18 should take you like 2 seconds. You look at the equation, you identify the slope. Not much to it. We talked about finding slope a lot of different ways. We talked about finding slope from a graph. We talked about finding slope from an equation. We talked about finding slope from 2 ordered pairs, and that's what we got on 19 and 20. You got your slope formula up there. So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, and find the slope. 21, we have rise over run for our slope. They give you 2 points, so you just count, essentially. (22) is kind of like the Celsius Fahrenheit, except they go ahead and tell us what the equation is. Hey. So this would be trying to approximate somebody's height based on the length of their humerus, kind of another science type function or equation. So if I knew somebody's humerus, which is the bone from the elbow to the shoulder, then I can use that to estimate the height. And so we're going to take this, the length of the humerus, we're going to plug it in for x, and we're going to find the height. Okay, 23. The directions say, by graphing the domain, visually estimate the domain. You don't have to show me the graph. I mean, if you wanted to draw a picture of it, you could, but you don't have to show me. That's not what we're doing on this picture. All we're doing is using the graph to identify the domain and the range. And we did that several different times. So graph it in your calculator, see what it looks like. We should hopefully kind of already have an idea of what it looks like. This is going to be your parabola. And then use that to identify your domain and range. Domain's your x's, range is your y's, and help you out there. 24 is another domain and range question. The one thing I would tell you here is this does not go on forever. There's no arrows at the end. So it stops at those two distinct points and doesn't go on. Okay, so when you use interval notation here, you're going to use brackets because it's going to go from here to here for domain, and same thing for range. 25 is just a vertical line test question. They give you a graph. Is it a function? Once again, should be real quick and straightforward, hopefully. 26, same thing, different graph. Is it a function? Use the vertical line test. 27, 28, and 29 are all graphs. You don't have to put anything on the blank. Just graph it, and as I told you guys from the beginning, you can use your calculator. I'm never going to tell you that you can't use your calculator. So you can use it as much or as little as you want. If it was me, I would probably put this in my calculator, get a couple of points from my calculator from the table, use those points, graph them, and be done. But you don't necessarily have to either. I mean, graphing out a slope-intercept form, we could go down one, make a point, use our slope. So there's a lot of different opportunities here. But just be really careful. I will pay attention to points. Is it going through the right points? That's going to be a really big part of this. 28, once again, just a table of values. Where's the low point? Where's the high point? What are some other points that would be on that graph? You can use your calculator to get those. And then 29 is just another graphing question. I will tell you that this one is multiple choice, so you don't necessarily have to graph it over there. You just have to tell me which one of these is the correct one. But you're also identifying the x-intercept and the y-intercept. So for the x-intercept, this is what we call the cover-up method, where we plug in 0 for y and find x. We plug in 0 for x and we find y. And tell me the two places it crosses the x and y axis. Okay. Any questions so far? All right, I'm going to let you guys work.